Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. And we are joined again by Dr. Kip. Welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And I was hoping that we had another scholar that joined our team last week. I was hoping to see him today, but I don't. I guess he can only make weekends, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, we're on to Deuteronomy 7, and this episode will probably flow a little bit better because this one is less sugar, unleaded, low tar, and P-Town free.
Low tar? Excuse me, I have to leave.
All right. So who wants to? Do we need a forward on Deuteronomy 7?
Oh, we got a few interesting things in this one. Honestly, one of the big prescriptions: the destruction of idols. So we're gonna have a chat about idols and Israelite polytheism. So it's gonna be fun today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And who is reading today?
I volunteer Lawrence.
All right. I can do that. That's fair. I'm going to read actually from the SBL Study Bible then.
Ooh.
The newly published one that came out less than a month ago.
Is that an NRSV? The Study Bible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an updated one,
Cool.
right? But still, yes, it's this one. You probably saw it floating around. If you don't,
So
have
I didn't go this year, but yeah, I did notice a bunch of my friends and picked theirs up. So just before you start, those handy articles and notes that appear in the SBL Study Bible, as I understand it, most if not all of those were just pulled out of Bible Odyssey, which is a resource online at the SBL site. So
Really?
yeah, people can it's free. People can go over there and just check out. There's got to be over 100 different articles written by scholars about all sorts of handy topics.
That has got to be so much better than the articles I cut out of this Bible. It was
Almost
a True Love Waits Bible.
Wow.
It was awful. Just awful.
Although I do believe, at least in their introduction, they talk about how for this translation, they incorporated a lot more textual witnesses. So
Excellent.
so it's hopefully a much better translation.
Nice.
And from as much as I've read through it so far, it seems to be more in plain English, which is great. So chapter 7. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are about to enter and occupy, and he clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations, more numerous and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must utterly destroy them. Make no covenant with them, and show them no mercy. Just like Cobra Kai said, do not intermarry with them. That one's actually important. Do not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons. For that would turn away your children from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. But this is how you must deal with them. Break down their altars, smash their pillars, cut down their sacred poles, or Asherah poles, and burn their idols with fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on earth to be his people, his treasured possession. It was not because you were more numerous than any other people that the Lord set his heart on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all peoples. It was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath that he swore to your ancestors, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know, therefore, that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who maintains covenant loyalty with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and who repays in their own person those who reject him. He does not delay, but repays in their own person those who reject him. Therefore, observe diligently the commandment, the statutes and the ordinances that I am commanding you today. Did you?
I got a question right away.
Sure.
So when God clears away many nations before you, how does God clear them away before
Oh,
you?
I know. Genocide with us. Come on.
So what really happens is, like, it is made clear a verse or two later, when it talks about, you know, when God gives them up to you and you defeat them. So what's really happening is that God ain't doing shit. It's that the Jewish people, the raiders, come in and kill everybody.
Effectively, yes, but they believe that they would not have had that ability to do that without God's permission. And
Yeah, it does.
that's really
God
that's really
empowers
well.
them. He's
Yeah.
Well, that
he's
takes me to my second point.
man of
So
bar.
God allows the raiders to come in and kill the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and Chigarites, and all of those. But he did that because he loves these people and hates all those other people.
I think it's
He
important.
does.
to
He does get
remember-
into it.
It's very retro. It's very retconned, right?
Oh yeah.
There are a good amount of things that point to that. Not only do we have the whole complete destruction of idols thing, but we also have the thing about not intermarrying. Now, I don't know if you guys have read Ezra and Nehemiah, but they stand very much in line with the philosophy of not intermarrying. They're like, yeah, thanks Cyrus for helping us, but we don't want our children banging your children. So the thing is, that would be weird, right? Because so many people already in this text, good people, presented in the text, I should say that, the heroes, right? They have already intermarried. This would not be an issue, but because in my view, at least, in my view, this is written probably exilic or post-exilically, right? This is it makes sense why it would fall into that camp, because at that time they were, upon returning from the exile, they were very much against intermarrying.
So could I just say, I mean, there's a whole other layer to this. It's your fault, Lawrence. You brought up Ezra and Nehemiah and the post-exilic return. So these are people who supposedly are coming from Babylon back into the land, and they're supposed to be clearing out and abstaining from intermixing and intermingling with the people who are there.
Yeah.
Who are those people?
Well, in many cases, those people
Samaritans.
were also Jews, and then you end up with the Samaritan divide and all of that, because the people who
so
were left
this
behind.
Probably be honestly Babylonians too, because they also moved around.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I think that one of the important, you see this come up, I think it's mentioned a couple times in Ezra and Nehemiah. It certainly comes up in the book of Jeremiah. And also, I'm thinking now too in some of the Deuteronomistic history, in particular in chapter 23 there, where Josiah is performing his cultic reforms. There's a term there that's commonly repeated, that you are to basically set yourself against and set yourself apart from the Ha'aretz, the people of the land. And it's very clear, especially when you look at texts like Jeremiah and in the Deuteronomistic history, that the people of the land are the people who are there already. So they're already there, prior
people of the land.
prior to the exile even starting. this elite group of temple worshippers in Jerusalem, and I think it's important for people to understand what this looks like too, because Solomon's temple in Jerusalem is not this massive structure, and for most people who live in the area, the closest they have ever gotten to it is the front gates, maybe inside the court. The vast majority of the people have never seen it. People, living out in the land, they just, it's a royal chapel. It's attached to the house of David. This is part of the royal establishment. And this is where much of this religious expression, this religious literature comes out of. So when they talk about setting themselves apart from the people of the land, it's another way of basically saying setting ourselves apart from the poor people and all those poor schmucks who don't live here inside the walls of Jerusalem and in the palace, or in the Acropolis with the rest of us. So yeah, when the Babylonian Judeans are coming back, these are the people like whoever was left, which yes, potentially includes Babylonians settling the area as well, but whoever's left is now just part of the rabble. Like it's like they're presented as foreigners. Like it's very much a text of displacement and dispossession, which is wild. If you work through the logistics of this, because they're basically, 60, 70 years ago, they were Israelites, all of them.
No,
but now,
if you look at the story of being dragged off to Babylon, it happens in several stages. There's the initial, they take a couple of the princes and the really, the sons of the wealthiest, and they're going to serve in the kingdom and probably be eunuchs. But, there's almost a little bit of a social benefit. We're going to go off and get a Babylonian education. And then through repeated returns, they take away more and more of the people, and it's just the rest. But the rest still leaves like all the farmers, all the poor people, all the lower class people who were Jews, who had been Jews forever.
Well,
for as long as they had it. Well, Israelites. Yeah. Before the term Jews would have been appropriate. Israelites. But and some of whom may very well have been Yahwists. And those just, indiscriminate rabble are left behind. And then they're assigned to the othering of these, evil peoples that are from the land. And it's just, it's so fucked up. Also, like, why is it every time God talks about his love, it ends in genocide? Is there, like, seriously, every time he talks about love, someone dies as a direct causal link, and usually it's a lot of people.
That's how he shows his love, Lilith. You just gotta accept
I show my love
into your
by
heart.
Stabbing you.
Although speaking of Jebus, though,
I was gonna say evidence that God is Jesus.
with the Jebusites too. So if you check like I think it's Joshua or Judges 19, I forget which, but it lists them as well, being of was it the land of Jebus?
Jebus.
Well, it's Yavus in Hebrew, but
okay, that's better. That's better.
Still
but it's still so funny.
Jebusi.
I like the American way of saying that. Jebus.
It just sounds better when Homer Simpson says it.
Help me, Jebus.
I think I'll start my commentary here, at least part of it, up to verse 11. So first on verse 1, Nelson comments, the chapter begins with a call for a complete dissociation from the nations. This isolation is a fundamental condition for keeping Israel loyal in an ideologically toxic environment. Any live and let live attitude would be an act of national suicide. The standardized list of extinct enemy nations should be understood as rhetorically indicating all of them. It communicates the overwhelming odds that the power of the divine warrior will overcome. These nations represent Israel's paradigmatic enemies, functionally similar to the standardized lists of foes in inscriptions lauding a king's triumphs, end quote. And John Cassian, in Conference 516 1 through 23, argued that the 7 nations prefigure for Christians the virtues which overcome innumerable vices.
That's
very nice.
What?
Does someone hear P-Town? No.
Wait, what?
I'm just
Wait,
kidding.
the
He wouldn't
7
have known
nations
that.
are the 7 virtues, not the 7 vices?
The virtues.
That's interesting.
Well, they're the bad guys.
Overcoming
the
them.
vices.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would be the virtues that overcome the vices. Although, yeah, for the list of 7, it's usually supposed to be 6, isn't it? It's usually
It's sometimes 3 even. As I've seen in
Often the
previous,
magic numbers don't line up with the actual numbers in
hold
the
on.
story, but they still use the magic numbers.
So
It
this
was
is
like Canaanites is
Sure, I'm
like
not the
a
only person who's
generic
noticed.
term, but also
this is
Yeah.
I think the
American-
parasites is missing for some.
Yeah, so if we
verses.
check Exodus 23:23, apparently. Yeah, so the 7 nations named in 7:1 represent the Deuteronomic version of a tradition that elsewhere speaks of 6 nations that occupied Canaan prior to the Israelites. So yeah, so 23:23.
But aren't
Exodus.
the parasites the people who live in Paris?
Yes, actually, that is the technical term for them.
I find the inclusion of the Hittites in these lists always kind of interesting, because it suggests to me something.
Yeah.
The,
Sorry, I read the Hivites.
No, they're both there.
Yeah.
They're
I just saw that. Sorry.
So the Hittites
But,
are, I think the story with the Hittites is like, so they're in the Bible, and then they got the English name Hittites, and then they discovered evidence of some culture,
The
and they called them the
Anatolian
Hittites.
Empire.
And then they were like, and then only later did where we were like, this is not the biblical Hittites, but they kept the name.
Maybe it's like the Iroquois.
I mean, what I got,
Well, they have their own. Maybe it's a similar
ended up
sounding.
So,
becoming-
I mean, it's as I understand it, it from the perspective of the author. I think most would concede that they're talking about the Anatolians from Turkey. But it is a little. It almost feels like a like they're sort of thrown in there as this famous empire that we once knew about, that was really powerful. But by this time, right? Certainly by the time of the Hittites and the Egyptians throughout the Late Bronze Age were the two powers that were basically competing with one another for control in the area. But certainly by the time of the early Iron Age, Middle Iron Age, the Hittites are long gone.
Well, and we have to remember that at least the first version of this, granted, may have endured some post-exilic editing, but the first version of Deuteronomy is probably being written during the time of Josiah or just prior, while they're keeping him in the little boy king being raised by the crazy priests who are all about killing all the other gods, people, and keeping all the power for themselves, and which is super healthy, great way to grow up. So
that's the other thing. That's the other problem I have. So a lot of representatives from God, a lot of God's mouthpieces, talk about how there's all these idols and the idols don't speak, right? Well, I mean, God doesn't do a lot of speaking either, really. I mean, that's why you have prophets. That's what prophets are. They're his mouthpieces, right? They're literally his speakers. So if you want to make the comparison about these harmless idols that mean nothing, why then do you have to destroy them all?
It kind of gives off the vibe of a very insecure boyfriend who can't let you have any fun toys because
yeah.
Well, I mean, isn't it a post hoc explanation for why they don't exist anymore?
Although I would say that there was a lot of belief in the ancient world about like if you want to kill a god or even someone that is existing in the land of the dead, you destroy their idol. That's why so many Egyptian things. So many Egyptian portrayals of
They
gods
get
have
defaced
they've
all
been
the time,
defaced.
yeah.
Like noses broken off so they can't breathe, eyes broken so they can't see. And even not gods, even just regular people, like you can see their Ka statues, the same thing. Those pieces are broken off because you want to kill them because they exist in some different world. So this could, in the ancient world, this would have been a way to kill off the other gods.
It's actually kind of there's a story a little bit like that in First Samuel when the Ark of the Covenant gets taken into Philistine territory.
Yeah, the Temple of Dagon.
Yeah, Dagon gets toppled in his arms and his legs are cut off.
He loses his hands and
Could it also be a propaganda to say like, look, we destroy this idol and it couldn't defend itself, so
of course it's propaganda.
I think, yeah, pragmatically speaking, I think that's it's a very powerful image. Also, do you guys know who the Jebusites are? I find
the only thing I know about them is stuff from the Bible.
It does not seem to be very clear because there's several of the groups that are represented. Sometimes they're totally evil and you should kill them all, and sometimes they're technically family because Esau or Lot or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe we can make a deal, but also, keep them at arm's length. Yeah, it's.
I think besides from
Bible,
the
within the Bible, they're most famous for being the original residents of the city of Jerusalem.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
David
Yes,
is actually
that was the verse I was thinking of.
Yeah.
They did note that they live there.
So God wants to give these people a promised land, but there's a bunch of other people already living there.
Yeah.
So let's just remove them. Oh, God is saying, I will remove them. But what he really means is, you're going to kill them. And then
don't forget,
me.
if you
With
don't
his
kill
blessing.
enough of them, if you don't kill
Utterly
enough of them, he
kill
gets
them.
very pissy and then he'll kill you back for being too merciful.
And then
and I know I promised you this promised land, but you're not going to get. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll let you see it. You can see it. You can't go into it, but I'll let you see it because I'm that much of a vindictive bitch.
Yeah.
God's got a lot of problems.
The term in verse 2 is actually hacharem tacharim.
Yes, and I have a comment on this.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, I'll read it. That's actually the comment that I was referring to, I think, back in the first episode, which I said it was quite long.
Yeah.
So
okay.
You could have let him say the thing first, and then
yeah, but I was waiting here for like 5 minutes.
Got the notes here. He's got
He
got to
does
get through them.
homework.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm the bad one. Okay.
So you must destroy them totally. In Hebrew, it's hacharem tacharim. And Lundbom comments, Hebrew hacharem, devote to destruction, is a term taken from holy war, referring to the ban, cherem, placed upon a captured city's inhabitants, sometimes also cattle and other spoil, for the purpose of devoting, i.e. destroying them, as a gift to Yahweh. According to Leviticus 27:29, no one falling under the ban could be ransomed. He or she must be put to death. In the earlier wars against Sichon and Og, men, women, and children came under the ban, but not the animals, as seen in 2 verses 34-35 and 3 verses 6-7. In Israel's subsequent wars against distant peoples, only adult males need to be destroyed. The women, children, cattle, and other material goods could be taken as loot, as seen in 20 verses 10-15. But in wars against the Canaanites, with the apparent exception of Ai, everything was to be devoted to destruction, as seen in 20 verses 16-18, compare Joshua 6:21. Some wars did in fact become cherem wars, as seen in Joshua 10 verses 28-40 and 11 verses 10-20. But we learn from the biblical narrative that the command to devote everything to destruction was not always carried out. Sometimes people simply disobeyed the command and were judged for their disobedience. For example, Achan in Joshua 7 and King Saul in 1 Samuel 15. When the people went up against Ai the second time, they were permitted to take cattle and spoil for themselves, as in Joshua 8:2. It happened too that some of the Canaanites simply could not be driven out, in which case they were subdued and usually put to forced labor, as seen in Joshua 16:10, 17:13, and Judges 1 verses 27-35.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Do you my I don't my modern Hebrew is really poor. Do you guys still employ this this syntactical feature of the infinitive absolute? Is that still a thing?
I need to I need to understand what infinitive absolute is.
So that's what we've got here. This construction is hacharem tacharim, where it's you've
It's like
got
a doublet.
the doublet, the repeated word. The first form is an infinitive absolute followed by a verb,
I
right?
think we do still have it.
Is that close
Yeah,
to
yeah.
the
But
genitive
it's
absolute?
That's
just but
probably
it's
the
rare.
noun. I think that's used. Is that the noun version? Like when in Hebrew you can like
I
turn a
think,
verb into a noun.
for example, hayo haya, which is once upon a time.
Yeah.
But it's rare in modern Hebrew, I
It's-
think.
So
Mhm.
this is a within the biblical text. This is a feature which is used to for like an emphatic expression. It's with great emphasis. You'll see these oftentimes translated into English as "you shall surely" or "you will certainly do this." So the expression here is yeah, it's you will utterly destroy them. You will make sure that they're completely obliterated. Also, this idea of haram is it's not just exclusive to Israel as well, to the Hebrew Bible or to Israelite literature as well. The term I'm working. I just was looking at this. So the term occurs in a famous inscription that was found. Oh shoot, where was it? I'm gonna get it wrong, but it's a ninth.
Mm.
I think
The
Mesha, right?
Misha stele. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a quote here by Lundbom actually. Devoting conquered peoples to the gods was practiced by other ancient peoples. The term cherem appears on the 9th century Moabite stone, where Mesha says he devoted 7,000 Israelite men, boys, women, girls, and maidservants to Asher Chemosh.
Yep.
So burned them.
So just I don't know. However
Yeah. Look,
you annihilate. They're not especially specific about procedures.
Methodology.
But we
I
see
think
that
it's
cherem.
What I got
We
out
see
of
that,
that is if you need to make sure that they're dead, that these are the people who established that first rule of Zombieland, where you do a double tap.
but we see that
I-
the practice of cherem was something that was already like known or employed in the
Yeah.
ancient Near East. So it's
Yeah.
not
That's true.
exclusively Israelite.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's kind of funny how much more immoral the moral argument makes God, because if you try and claim that the Bible is written by a perfectly good God, then you have all of these atrocities and you end up trying to justify genocide. If you say it's just people who said my God told me to do exactly what everyone else was doing at the time, then you have barbaric things happening in a barbaric time where everyone else was doing the exact same shit, which is no
Yeah.
worse than anyone.
Yeah. Is anyone interested in hearing? I've got the text of the inscription here. Is anyone interested in hearing how
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
goes? In
Please.
so this is from the Misha stele, which was erected by King Misha to commemorate his battles, his fights with the king of the north, usually Ahab, I believe.
Not
So
Odin?
and not that far north. So in lines 14 to 20, he says, Chemosh is his god. Chemosh said to me, go take Nebo from Israel. So I went by night and fought against him from the break of dawn until noon, taking it and slaying all 7,000 men, boys, women, girls, and maidservants, for I had devoted them to destruction for Ashtar Chemosh, as that's the line that Tomar quoted. And I took from there and then there's a break, and then it mentions something belonging to Yahweh, and it says dragging them. These are probably people from the royal class, dragging them before Chemosh He says, and the king of Israel did build Yahaz, and he dwelt there while he was fighting against me. But Chemosh drove him out before me, and I took from Moab 200 men, all first-class warriors, and set them against Yahaz, and took it in order to attach it to the district of Divon. It's always very interesting looking at some of these contemporary, and it's too bad we don't have more of them, because looking at a contemporary text like this, it's literally just, a matter of swapping out the names for your deities in terms of how you're
Expressions
expressing
are like
yourself,
identical,
right?
yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely the same phrasing, and it's telling, because they use that phrasing. This was the monument of a king saying this. You have the same language here, also written during a dynastic period, which there is a king and there is a political structure, and we do speak in a certain manner for the elite. Blah blah blah. We are most displeased. The same phrasing, the same level of phrasing, the same. It's just, my God said I should go kill these people, and I devoted them to destruction. So I did.
By the way, just Dr. Kip, I looked online and I found something that said that the infinite absolute is not used anywhere after biblical Hebrew. It's like even like Qumran Hebrew, it doesn't use it.
Now I have to go and look.
It's almost, I think it's
interesting.
It's like almost absent.
I've noticed
Qumran
the
Hebrew,
sort
right?
of rhyming couplet concepts, not so much rhymes in the English sense, but rhyming concepts and reflective concepts, and 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7 he detests, that kind of all through scripture. And I wonder if that became such an idiom in the Hebrew texts because of all the time that had to be spent harmonizing different sources into something that didn't sound like a complete mishmash.
Oh, there's an idea.
That's a pretty tough call to make on that one, honestly.
I'm not claiming certainty on this one. I'm just saying it's a possible source for this linguistic tradition. And damn, it would make sense.
Yeah. I'm going to leave the infinitive absolute alone after this, but I wanted to say it's really fun just looking these all up in the Hebrew Bible, and then checking to see how the Greek translator of the Septuagint or translators are trying to handle these expressions, because they don't have a fucking clue what to do with them.
Yeah, I think the description I saw was like,
wait.
it's very simple, but it's used in a very complicated way.
Yeah.
Like the actual structure of the word is very simple. It's like just the root of the word with specific vowel symbols, and yet it's very subtle. It could be used in slightly different ways.
Was that verse 2 that had that, you said?
Yes, verse 2.
Okay, I'm checking my Septuagint right now.
Are you looking at the Septuagint? I haven't looked at this one. I've looked at a few of them, and it's never consistent. Of course, the different translators too, right? But they clearly don't understand. Most of them, if not all of them, don't understand what the expression, the syntactical force of the expression. What does it say here?
Dieteto proshumas.
Afanismo, afani. See, exactly, like they've got here. They basically they translate it with a noun, and a noun and a verb.
Yeah, dietek and interesting. Okay.
If you're going to talk like that, Lawrence, we have to light some candles first, dim the lights. The spell's just not going to work otherwise.
Like you shall destroy it to destruction is kind of what you would translate from the Septuagint, which doesn't make any sense in Greek.
Kill it to death.
So so
essentially, crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of the women.
Or as a friend from childhood used to say, I'm gonna kill you and then you'll die.
Yeah.
Say it.
No, just if you want to continue, or do you want to read some comments?
Well, I'm gonna read some comments. So Bean says, how do people come to different conclusions about the message of the Bible using different interpretations? I see a lot of people claiming that the Bible isn't open to interpretation.
Yeah, that's a interesting
It
question.
depends on the personality of the person, right?
It does.
I can't even think of a biblical literalist who wouldn't admit that the Bible is open to interpretation.
You see this in like Jewish
Literally just picked one
commentators.
off the panel.
Yeah, it's because they're all concentrating on different things, right? So, like in
Yeah.
the Jewish commentaries, they'd be concentrating on faith and practice, and Christian ones.
Yeah, but it again, it depends on how the commentator outlooks. For example, Ibn Ezra is the more rationalist one. In the Maimonides is the more like Kabbalistic, like mystic one. So it really like it depends on what his perspective is on the Bible. So
Yeah.
There's usually an intellectual tradition. There are tons of them actually. They have a very complicated evolutionary tree, and basically they will have been fed a certain interpretation from the beginning of their indoctrination as obviously the only correct one, and everyone who says differently doesn't value the Bible and hates God and is blaspheming. And then if you actually try and trace how they got there from the text, because sometimes it's a bit of a stretch, you'll end up, tracing your way through some abbey and some group of monks that were debating something 600 years ago, and they had a really passionate acolyte who started at this and that and the next thing. So it's just they keep splintering, and then they keep killing each other over the different patterns of Russell's teapot. It's
important topics like, did Jesus own the clothes that he wore?
And the thing is, like, this even happens in like real time with just historical events or just events that are happening. People will interpret the same event in different ways, even if they were both there. So it's it is hard to say exactly why they do that, but yeah, so we did cover some of the possible reasons, although I think that in order to at least just defend what I do and what Kip does, for me, it boils down, when I first approach a text, it boils down to trying to figure out, first and foremost, the genre of what I'm reading. And then I can start to kind of contextualize it. And
that's the problem. You're supposed to read it in the spirit.
Yeah, that's right. The genre is in the spirit. Yeah. Oh my God, I forgot.
So how much weed does one need to be appropriately in the spirit?
Yeah, I think that the value of what we do is trying to, because my approach is historical critical, right? So I think that trying to find the time and place for these things will help explain them far better than any other interpretation, because that way you can explain all the other interpretations. So to me, it just makes the most sense.
Do you mean that you're looking for the actual original context?
Oh yeah, I am, and I want to rip out all the rest of my hair.
I love how they're like, you're taking it out of context, and you're doing like a breakdown of 16 historical aspects and how they interact. Yeah, I'm taking it out of context. Sure.
So the next comment is Mr. Creenan, who says the Bostraphodian, Greco-Semitic, tetragrammarian mystics thought of storytelling, name-making, and the dangerous magic of conjuration.
As the dangerous magic
of conjuration. Okay. Somebody want to explain that to me?
I think he's trying to say that they thought of, when you say a story, you make it true.
Oh yeah, that's one of the ideas that permeates Egyptology. Is like every time you retell a story, every time you have like something inscribed on a wall, it continuously happens. So like that's the current idea. I don't know how much I buy into that one, but the idea that like names being important. I would say that, like, so in Egypt, of course, you have like, if you know someone's real name, you can cast spells on them, which is why it was dangerous for anyone but, like, if you were Pharaoh, it was dangerous for anyone but yourself and your mother to know your real name. That's why you had a throne name. And even in the Bible, this hiddenness of a person's name is kind of important. If you take a look at Ecclesiastes, there's a verse that suggests that your name will be hidden or in darkness, something like that. I forget the phrasing, but the reason it's important is because names were seen as part of the identity. Like there would be no me if I wasn't named Lawrence. So that's like an intrinsic part of being in the ancient world. So that was certainly used as in magic, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is Yahweh is like a Daedra in Skyrim that you can accidentally summon and he'll just kill everyone.
Yeah, but I totally get the thing about the not knowing the real name thing, because for years I hung with people who went by alternate names they come up with for themselves, and if you use their real name, it kind of freaks them out a little bit.
Interesting.
And I was kind of one of them for a while.
Yeah, we still don't know what L stands for.
Oh God.
Beautiful Joe offers $1.99 and says, "I love you, Aaron." Dr. Sorry. We love you, Aaron. Dr. Kip, where did you get your PhD?
University of Manchester, 2009. That's in Manchester in the United Kingdom, not
the
I'm
real
told there's
Manchester.
a Manchester in the United States, but
yeah.
Disturbing thought. Manchester.
Okay, I'll continue my commentary. Now we're in verses 3 to 4. Tigay comments, the reason for the severe treatment of the Canaanites is to prevent the Israelites from intermarrying with them and being lured into the worship of their gods in violation of the first two commandments. This is the same reason given for the Canaanites' expulsion in Exodus 23 verses 32 to 33 and 34 verses 15 to 16. Deuteronomy 20 verses 17 to 18 explains that these steps are required because of the Canaanites' abominable religious rites, such as child sacrifice, necromancy, and other occult arts. The experience at Peor, recorded at Numbers 25 verses 1 to 3, had already showed how sexual attraction leads to worship of foreign gods.
Yeah, those are always fun stories.
Yep.
Thank you, 1984. We'll be sure to suppress our sex instinct so you can keep us controlled.
Oh, can I say something else here in verse 4 about Yahweh's blazing anger? So when I teach this stuff, quite often I focus in on the word here, which is commonly used for God's anger, off. That's the word,
nose.
And it means nose, right? And it's a really interesting connection, but I think it's a totally sensible connection, because within this culture, you essentially appease the wrath of the god through the offering of sacrifices. And when Yahweh talks about receiving sacrifices, sacrifices that are given to him, he always says they're a pleasing aroma to him. So it's almost like they're settling down the nose. They're quelling the wrath as he's breathing them in.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in Exodus a commentary by Amos Chacham who says that the nose metaphor is like a person who is so angry that he like breathes through his nostrils or something like that. So I'll continue on to verse 5. They're Asherah poles. In Hebrew, it's Asherehem, which singular Asherah. Rashi writes that these are trees which the Canaanites worshipped. Lundbom writes that the Asherim are feminine fertility symbols, either trees or wooden poles. Nelson notes that the Asherah pole was associated with the cult of Yahweh, perhaps as a mediator of his fertility blessings, and that Deuteronomy is reacting to contemporary dangers under the guise of foreign survivals. Weinfeld notes that the Kuntilat Ajud inscription, dated from the end of the 8th century BCE, reads, I have blessed you to Yahweh Shomron and his Asherah, and Yahweh of Teman and his Asherah. And Augustine, in Sermon 62:17, gives a practical advice on opposing idolatry. He writes, The first thing we try to do is to break the idols in the pagans' hearts. When they too become Christians, they either invite us in to perform this good work, or else they get in first with it before us. The thing we have to do now is pray for them, not get angry with them.
Sorry, I was just checking the Septuagint for God's anger there. So interestingly, you said that in Hebrew it also means nose, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in Greek, the how they translated it was with thumos. That's the word that's used there, and that can also mean heart, which is funny to me.
It seems like it might be sort of a seat of the emotions thing. I know that different body parts can be seen as the seat of different emotions. We use the heart a lot, but we still talk about butterflies in the stomach and smoke coming out of your ears. It sounds like they were a bit more smoke coming out of your nose, but for anger, it's not crazy. So yeah, I guess I can see that. But
of course, the Asherah, right?
Oh,
Of
yeah.
course, the big inscriptions. There's the Quinta and there's Kirbet el Kom. I'm probably butchering that. But especially Quinta Drud, there's the inscription Yahweh and his Asherah, and it literally has like a depiction of Yahweh and his consort. Like this is very obvious.
And you can tell which one is Yahweh because he's got a big
pole.
Yes, a very big
appendage.
He's got a very big Asherah pole.
He's got a very big crown because he's kingly.
Now, all of these commentators understand what Asherah means, or that's a name referring to someone, right?
Right. Yeah. So in Deuteronomy, in the Deuteronomistic history, they always refer to Asherah poles instead of Asherah, because of course in the ancient world, if you wanted to worship Asherah, you'd go to an Asherah pole, but because they are trying to take away a lot of stuff from the gods, they are, instead of saying Asherah, they say Asherah pole.
Yeah, and they're clearly, God got divorced and he did not handle it well. He decided to try and erase.
He talks about it in Ezekiel.
Yeah, he decides to erase his ex-wife from history, and so every mention has to be, she was never my wife. She's that stupid whore who took over all my land, and we're going to destroy her. It's giving podcast vibes.
I think some of the earlier commentators didn't know who Asherah was, and like for example, Rashi says these are trees that they worship. So he seems to have some knowledge of the actual tradition it's based on, but I don't think he knew, for example, about Asherah.
We do have. I know. There's at least one coin from Tyre, from around the I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think it's 3rd or 2nd century BCE that has depicted like a large foliating tree with a couple of like standing stones underneath it. So it's not and actually this is something too that the rabbis talk about trees that were in the land that were used as ashtarot. Yeah. So it's not. I think it's probably not an idea that's necessarily divorced from historical reality.
Yeah, actually, there's a reference to Ashtoreth in verse 13, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's also possible that the word "etz" means tree and can also mean a pole. For example, the expression of to hang someone is you hang them on a tree, but it doesn't necessarily mean hang on a tree. It could mean hang on a cross or a pole.
And the stories make clear that the Asherah poles are made of wood. When Gideon destroys another Baal sect, because of course he does, he breaks down the idol of Baal to make altar for the Lord and chops up the Asherah pole and uses as that wood, and then slaughters the cattle or oxen or whatever on the for an offering to the Lord. So he's violated and desecrated the spiritual artifacts of these other gods and repurposed them to the worship of the one true God, who was really the only God all the time. Swear, guys, for realsies.
I'll say
gotta cut-
one more thing about the Asherah pole in connection to Josiah's reforms. When he takes the Asherah pole out of the temple, Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, the text says that he basically grinds it down to bits, and then he burns it. But then he takes the ashes out of the city and he scatters them all over the graves of the Ha'aretz, the common people, just to add insult to injury.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. By the way, the term Amaretz, which is, I guess, comes from Ezra and Nehemiah talking about the people of the
Mhm.
land, is kind of in biblical tradition seems to have come to mean like a dumb person, an idiot, like
Yeah, even in modern Hebrew, move it's like means
yeah.
idiot.
And you even
Oh,
have
really?
like you
Yeah.
can even say Amaretzes to mean like
Oh, wow.
stupidity. I don't think that works
So
in Hebrew or
basically,
Yiddish.
the uneducated people who we all think are stupid because we're just so
Common
special.
people.
And so
Yeah.
we're going to desecrate their
people.
Yeah.
grave to
I
prove
mean,
our
the English
superiority.
word idiot as well comes from like Greek for simple.
Yeah.
People.
You know, God is such a dick, and then you learn more context and you find out more detail, and he's just so much worse than you thought.
And coincidentally, there's
It's
a
like calling
comment
someone
in
a
the
pleb.
yeah. There's a there's a comment in the chat that says somebody says that they're looking for what's ultimately true, and so far they lean toward Judaism. They would like to talk with me one time about why it's not correct. I'm just
Their display name is Noahide, which means it's a
Oh.
term used for non-Jewish people that are keeping the 7 Noahide laws.
Yeah.
The group that the group that I grew up in, they were actually some of the first Jewish groups to try and kind of, it's not proselytizing because they're not converting people, but they were the first people to try and actually let's talk to non-Jewish people about keeping the 7 Noahide laws.
yeah.
And they're more
I just want to.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it's just, yeah, they're just like they're similar to the Ten Commandments, but more simple. Like there's nothing about keeping the Sabbath, but there is about establishing courts of law and not eating flesh of a living animal. For some
I'm
reason.
just
But
wondering if the person that's asking this question has seen any other episodes of Blasphemers Bible before now. You know,
maybe not.
if you're looking for the reasons why it's not correct, I think this series shows it.
Okay, so I'll continue. On verse 7, you are the fewest of all people. This is in contradiction with other verses that describe the Israelites as a large nation. For example, 26:5, and as numerous as the stars, as seen in 1:10, 10:22, and 28:62. Rashi wrote that the intention is, you diminish yourselves. For example, Abraham said, I am dust and ashes in Genesis 18:27, and Moses and Aaron said, and we, what are we, in Exodus 16:7. Rashbam wrote that the Israelites thought that they were more numerous and more powerful than the other nations, and thus could conquer the land by themselves. Moses then says that God wouldn't like them on account of their being numerous, even if that were true, but because he made an oath with their forefathers. Weinfeld writes that this verse should be understood against the background of the kingdom of Judah before its destruction, and that verses which describe the Israelites as numerous are based on older sources reflecting the flourishing situation of the United Kingdom. On verse 10, Lundbom comments, there is another face of God, which is to repay blatant evil and enmity towards him. The plural suffix on meshalem, repay, refers to, quote, every one of his enemies, end quote, according to Ibn Ezra. Rashbam says God will punish sinners either in their own lifetime or subsequently up to the 4th generation. Compare Exodus 25:34-7 and Numbers 14:18. In his view, there is no punishment for any sin beyond the 4th generation. But the verse may be reflecting the retribution formula in Deuteronomy 24:16, reiterated in Jeremiah 31:30 and Ezekiel 18:4, which states that each person will be held accountable for his own sin. If so, the present verse is departing from the old retribution formula, which holds that the sins of the ancestors are meted out on subsequent generations. But Rashbam is correct in saying that verses 9 to 10 reiterate the principle that, quote, the measure of good, i.e. reward, is greater than the measure of misfortune, i.e. punishment, end quote. Rashi says that, Weinfeld says that praying congregations in post-exilic times preserved both the old formula, expressing communal responsibility, and the Deuteronomic formula, expressing individual responsibility. That's it from a commentary on this part.
What's that? Did we read
What
through?
verse are we up to?
Verse 11, right?
11.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let me
We
read a
read
couple
verse
of comments.
11 already.
Yeah, we
Let me read a couple of comments before
Okay.
we get there. Mr. Cranit says, Lawrence, I think Dr. Sledge would say that the naming magic conjuration was an idea from medieval Hermeticism, backwards projected.
So I think that there's a good paper from Roth about the anonymity of the suffering servant that goes into the significance of names, and he does point out not only that Ecclesiastes verse that I mentioned, but also a few more that would predate that, and as well as I think the importance of at least during like Akhenaten's reign, right? He I guess he erased names of other gods. So I feel like there's something more to that. I wouldn't say it's backwards projected from something medieval.
I'd also point out that having some idea that the true name of a thing gives you magical power over it is something that appears in a lot of cultures, like a lot of different times. They're not all directly linked. There's been some variant of that in, I believe, in China and in all kinds of other places, that there would be like a secret name to a thing that to know it would give you power. And definitely, yeah, it's sort of had its fads through time, but I don't think it's a single thing. Like there's been variants of it in many different places.
How ridiculous. It's like Rumpelstiltskin. People take that thing seriously. So, Mr. Crennan says, Lawrence, I was more interested if it was repress, a relationship
Represents.
with bhakti. I'm sorry, what?
It's supposed to be short for represents.
Represents a relationship with bhakti, personalism, discipline, where the name is a tool for making it, the god, real to the practitioner.
I don't know enough about bhakti personalism, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one in the panel that's probably read the Bhagavad Gita, and I don't know what this is either. And then the Sinister Porpoise says, for $2, thank you, helping Aaron give people good religious education. Thank you so much. All right, and Lawrence, you were reading?
Yes, Lawrence.
I was, yeah. Did Kip? Did you have something on 11?
Oh, I just I was gonna say there, where Deuteronomy quite frequently classifies these groups of instructions, the mitzvot, the chukim, and the mishpatim, the laws, the instructions, and the rules. There was a time that some scholars had tried to align each of these with a specific part of the Torah. Some thought, well, maybe this is, the covenant code, and the and this here is specific to the Decalogue. But yeah, I was just going to say it's fun to think about, but it's long since been abandoned because it doesn't really seem to align clearly with specific elements within the text. Unlike where you'll get there when Deuteronomy talks about itself, the book of Deuteronomy talks about itself. It identifies itself as Torah.
Lawrence, you can finish this chapter.
All right, we'll do. On to verse 12. These are the blessings for obedience. If you heed these ordinances by diligently observing them, the Lord your God will maintain with you the covenant loyalty that he swore to your ancestors. He will love you, bless you, and multiply you. He will bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground, your grain and your wine and your oil, the increase of your cattle, and the issue of your flock in the land that he swore to your ancestors to give you. You shall be the most blessed of peoples, with neither sterility nor barrenness among you or your livestock. The Lord will turn away from you every illness. All the dread diseases of Egypt that you experienced, he will not afflict on you, but he will lay them on all who hate you. You shall devour all the peoples that the Lord your God is giving over to you, showing them no pity. You shall not serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you. If you say to yourself, these nations are more numerous than I, how can I dispossess them? Do not be afraid of them. Just remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt. The great trials that your eyes saw, the signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. The Lord your God will do the same to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. Moreover, the Lord your God will send swarms of hornets against them until even the survivors and the fugitives are destroyed. And apparently the meaning of the hornets there is uncertain.
I have a comment on this.
Nice.
Great. Have no dread of them, for the Lord your God, who is present with you, is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will clear away these nations before you little by little. You will not be able to make a quick end to them. Otherwise, the wild animals would become too numerous for you. But the Lord your God will give them over to you and throw them into great panic until they are destroyed. He will hand their kings over to you, and you shall blot out their name from under heaven. No one will be able to stand against you until you have destroyed them. The images of their gods you shall burn with fire. Do not covet the silver or the gold that is on them and take it for yourself, because you could be ensnared by it, for it is abhorrent to the Lord your God. Do not bring an abhorrent thing into your house, or you will be set apart for destruction like it. You must utterly detest and abhor it, for it is set apart for destruction.
You hate what I tell you to hate.
And
I
you
do wanna
kill
make
who I tell you to kill.
I do want to make a point out. It says, oh, God couldn't destroy the nations too quick straight away because then the wild beasts would multiply in the land and you wouldn't be able to cope with it. And it's like, well, so God can't handle a few wild animals? Like he could kill all the animals in the flood, but here he's like, oh no, the poor innocent bunnies.
Yeah, well, they've got sharp, pointy teeth. But honestly, you have to notice how wildly inconsistent this story is. If you even pay the slightest attention to the numbers, like if you even make a note, when they left Egypt, they were supposed to have 600,000 men of war, which would mean adult males between a specific age range, which would mean you might have as many as 3 million people. How big is Israel compared to, say, Great Britain?
Smaller.
Small. It's
It's
smaller.
Tiny.
Welcome.
You're honestly telling me that if you took all people out of there, 3 million people come in and they're just going to be overwhelmed by lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Well, we don't know how big
No!
the desert generation is. Or do we do we
Well,
have
yeah,
another
God does like to
census?
kill people a lot, so But what? So he takes out 3 million, comes back with 3,000, and is like, "I'm keeping my promise to you. Maybe we better do this slowly."
Well, it would
Yeah.
help. It would make the story more not believable, but it would. I don't know what the word is. Like if you were trying to make the story more
Coherent-ish?
believable, you would say, "Oh, there were so many of us," but then only a few of us survived to hear the story.
Yeah.
Okay,
I want to do the
sorry.
math on this and also the Book of Mormon, where they give you the numbers for the people to start out, and then they start accounting all of the conflicts and all of the thousands of people that die in every one of these conflicts over a limited period of time. So you know how many people started out and how many people died over the next decades or centuries after that. And I'm pretty sure there's no way that these people could have turned into rabbits or hamsters or whatever to procreate that many people to kill so many tens of thousands over
Well,
that
we
period.
did the math on the birth rate from the 70 that came under Jacob to the 3 million or so that left in the 400 years, depending on the account you take. And we pretty much figured that every woman was having 65 children rapid fire. So if they kept that up, just cha-ching.
So they're all having sextuplets.
Who knows? Maybe after the fiery serpents, the women were like, maybe not. Let's not have that many kids.
Well, you see, in the ancient days, under God's power, he was able to allow women to have
Back
8
then,
births
genetics
in
was
a minute.
pure.
Six.
Yeah,
Right.
as 8 even. He kept it nice with 6.
Because the genetics were pure. Yes, absolutely. Because and the after the flood and something magic.
Genetic entropy. Yeah.
Yeah, things and stuff.
So are we ready to move on to
No,
I think Tomer
unfortunately,
has
I
some
have commentary as always. Yeah. So on verse 13, the fruit of your womb. In Hebrew, it's pri bitnecha. Bitnecha. Yeah, it's bitnecha. Literally, the fruit of your belly. As Ibn Ezra notes, this is a euphemism for human offspring and occurs frequently in Deuteronomy. For example, 7:13 and chapter 28. It appears there a lot, and 39. And in other texts like Genesis 32 and Isaiah 13:18. Belly in Hebrew, beten in the Bible can also mean womb, as seen in Jeremiah 1:5 and Job 3:11. On the your grain, new wine, and olive oil. These are the main agricultural products of Israel, as seen in 6:11, 8:8, and 28:51. Tigay, citing Christian David Ginsburg, writes that the products are in order of their ripening: the grain in spring, the grape in summer, and the olive at its end. Weinfeld notes that the gan, grain, and tirosh, new wine, are originally associated with divine names. The gan was a deity in Syria and Mesopotamia, and in Ugaritic literature, Baal is named the son of the gan. Tirosh is attested in a god list from Ugarit. And
so they had a god of tits and wine back then as well.
Yeah, that's the secret. I am the god of tits and wine. Where's my wine?
Now, on the calves and lambs here, calves derives from shegar and lambs from ashterot. Rashi writes that calves are called shegar because the female casts out meshageret from her womb, and that lambs are called ashterot because they enrich ma'ashirot, their owners. And Nelson writes that there is a satirical reference to the names of other rival gods, Shagar and Ashtaroth, who are mocked and robbed of their claims by their use in this formula. He writes that their names are, quote, demythologized, quote unquote, so that the blessing of the fertility of domestic animals is dissociated from them and instead tied to Yahweh. Thus, the gods are demoted into inanimate powers of blessing that operate under Yahweh's control. On verse 15, the horrible diseases you knew in Egypt. Tigay comments, this could refer to the pestilence and skin inflammation that were part of the 10 plagues, Exodus 9 verses 3 and 10, and Psalm 78:50. More likely, it refers to diseases endemic to Egypt, such as elephantiasis, ophthalmia, and dysentery. The Roman natural historian Pliny in the 1st century CE called Egypt the mother of skin diseases and referred to elephantiasis as, quote, the particular Egyptian disease, end quote, in Natural History's book 26, chapters 3-5.
Does the name come from like the city, Elephantine or whatever it's called? I'm guessing.
It seems like it.
Elephantitis, isn't that the one where one part of your body grows disproportionately
large?
Oh,
maybe because it's just the appearance of an elephant, like.
It's like where I forget. I think is that the one where stuff turns to bone?
No, it's the one where it enlarges.
You end up with an engorged something.
Yeah,
like
it's
some
engorged.
part of your body is just ridiculously large, and
Yeah,
obviously
yeah,
then
that's what I
skin
meant.
is, you know,
Yeah.
accommodates
Basically
and it
like an
becomes
elephant.
distorted, and yeah, you end up.
And now verse 16, you must destroy them. The Hebrew Bible reads, and you will eat or consume all the peoples. Tigay notes that the root aleph chaf lamed, to eat, is used to describe destruction and annihilation, as seen in Jeremiah 10:25 and Zechariah 12:6. Likewise, Sa'ad Gaon renders destroy, but the Septuagint reads, you shall eat the spoils of the nations. It uses the achal here, but to mean eat. And then it says, but the spoils, it's not the nations themselves. About the hornet in verse 20. In Hebrew, it's hatzir'ah. This word appears in Exodus 23:28 and Joshua 24:12. Most early translations, Chazal in the Talmud Sotah 36a and Rashi, understood that actual hornets are meant. Sa'ad Gaon and Ibn Ezra wrote that this refers to a skin disease that is related with tzarat, i.e. leprosy. Hornets are sometimes used as a metaphor for attackers or invaders, as seen in 144, Isaiah 7 verses 18 to 19, and Psalms 118:12. Lundbom notes the opinion of Edward Neufeld, who points out that insects were used as warfare agents in the ancient Near East, and so we may have an early form of biological warfare. Weinfeld, however, rejects this interpretation. Tigay proposed that Tzir'ah is a metonymy for panic or frenzy, like that caused by wasps, and means that God will cause the remaining Canaanites to panic and flee or be caught. He compares it to the Greek oistros, which means horsefly, but also vehement passion or madness or frenzy. Compare Odyssey 22, sections 197 to 300.
Ibn Ezra also mentions that it sounds similar to tzarat, the leprosy.
As I said.
Oh, you did mention that. I didn't hear that.
Yes, I did.
I've never heard of insects actually being used in warfare in this time and place. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Do we have any evidence that
Maybe
happened?
Dropping a bee's nest, maybe. Like,
Well, yeah, but hitting a bee's nest and running away is something little boys thought of before. So.
Yeah, he just notes Neufeld. Like he says, he points out that the insects were used as warfare agents in the ancient Near East. So what we may have here is an early form of biological warfare. So.
Why didn't they just ride dinosaurs like Hannibal used elephants?
Or maybe it is an indicator of just how tiny these skirmishes were. Just bang a wasp's nest and watch all the people run away before you.
I think I always used to read it as one wasp.
It is, yeah.
Like the language is like
Hatzir'ah, the hornet. Yes.
Did you say in your like Jewish version of Sunday school they had like coloring books with giant ass hornets?
I will
no, I didn't get that.
Yeah, I will say Rashi says here, this is a flying insect which injected a poisonous substance into them and castrated them and blinded them in every place where they would hide.
Castrated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ow!
Yeah.
Very powerful venom.
I tend to think TK is probably
okay
right about this.
I have more, Aaron. I'm sorry. Verses 23 to 24. Nelson comments, verses 23 to 24 describe a joint sacred war in which Yahweh and Israel work together to destroy the enemy. Panic is the classic weapon of Yahweh as divine warrior, verse 23, and Judges 7, verses 19 to 22. But in this sacred war, Yahweh does not act alone. Yahweh is the grammatical subject of most of the conquest verbs, but Israel too will finish them off, quote unquote, make their names perish, quote unquote, and destroy, quote unquote, them in verses 22 to 24. In verse 24, enemy kings, quote unquote, are the particular targets of destruction. Perhaps this is a way of saying that a free and egalitarian society cannot coexist with oppressive kings. Making their names perish, quote unquote, no doubt reflects the political practice of excising hated names from monuments, but such action also mirrors Yahweh's own acts of judgment, as in Deuteronomy 9:14 and 29:20.
Interestingly, the way that the Septuagint translators did it for verse 20 there in the wasps, right? They're hornets, whatever. So interestingly, how they did it was they just used the plural for the nest. So wasps' nests.
Okay.
On verse 25, the images of their gods you are to burn in the fire. According to Lundbom, the command to burn idols is only found in Deuteronomy. These were made of wood. These were made of wood with gold and silver overlay, as in Isaiah 30:22 and Habakkuk 2:19. So they could be burned. Such idols were in use by the Assyrians and Babylonians. Another interpretation given by Ibn Ezra: you shall not take a bribe of money to leave them alone. And finally, detestable to the Lord, in Hebrew, to'avat Yehovah. Weinfeld notes that this expression is found only in Deuteronomy and Proverbs, and it's appended to next to laws whose common rationale is hypocritical attitude and false pretension. He writes, hypocrisy and false pretension may appear in the social sphere, dealing perversely with one's fellow man or woman, and in the cultic sphere, dealing perversely with God, as, for example, sacrificing to him and provoking him to at the same time. Proverbs 15:8, Deuteronomy 17:1, and 18 verses 9 to 11. In present case, the tolerance of idols in Israel is an abomination to Yahweh because it misrepresents the true nature of the God of Israel. Identical expressions appear in the Egyptian wisdom of Amenemope, quote, an abomination to the god Re, and end quote, and there also it occurs in the context of hypocrisy. And that's it for my commentary.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything to say on Deuteronomy 7?
I think we've covered most of it.
Another.
All right. Be happy to move on to Deuteronomy 8. I'll go ahead and read that one.
Sure.
Unless somebody else wants to volunteer, I'll take it over. This entire commandment that I command you today, you must diligently observe, so that you may live and increase and go on and occupy the land that the Lord promised on oath to your ancestors. Remember the long way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness in order to humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commandments, because I'm all-knowing, except when I don't know shit. He humbled you by letting you hunger, then by feeding you with manna, with which neither you nor your ancestors were acquainted, in order to make you understand that one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. The clothes on your back did not wear out, and the feet did not swell these 40 years. Know then, really, the feet didn't swell in 40 years.
Not
all the
for
people
40
walking
years,
around.
man.
I'm wondering how
if people started out at 20, that by the time they're 60 and they're still walking, I think some of them have neuropathy. Some of them have some issues with their. What?
Aaron, it's a miracle. Shut up.
Oh, no, that's not the miracle. The miracle is that their clothes never wear out, which means that, the friction that causes little atoms of, the angels have to pick them up and stick them back on in the night.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I just want to say I have an interesting comment on this, I swear.
I'm sure
There's
you
a few.
do, as do I, because I study Ingersoll. So yeah, so are the angels like picking up the dust for the little bits of cloth and sticking it back on in the night, resewing buttons like tiny little elves? And also, what happens to the kids' clothes? Do their robes grow with them?
Yep.
It just oh well, you left when you were 4.
Actually,
and you're
yes.
20 now, and your clothes are still look like the day I made them. Damn.
Yeah.
Actually, you're kind of on the point. Lily, you're kind of on the point, and I'll get to that on my commentary.
Yeah. You know how in every
I like how God is using this excuse, right? He's blaming the victim, right? I'm not lost. You're lost. It would have been a 2-week walk, but we spent 40 years because reasons.
Yeah,
it's your fault. Everything's your fault.
You can't make an accurate map when you think the world is flat. So
yeah.
Okay.
You probably mentioned this in in the past, but I've always loved how the word manna in Hebrew is like, especially in like the Canaanite cognates, means what?
Yeah. I
So
think
do
I
you want us
mentioned
to
it in
eat
Man.
what?
yeah. They
Yeah.
even
So
say manhu, which
What is this?
I think in
What is
Aramaic
this?
it means what is this?
Yeah.
so
I think I mentioned it on
God
Exodus.
gave them special magic food and they named it the fuck is
What?
this?
Yes,
Exactly.
Yes.
essentially. Although it's interesting though, right? Because they kind of hint at the word at the food being the word, right? So you don't survive on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Like right after saying,
true,
"But
yeah.
I brought you manna, which you and no one else had ever had before." Now, interestingly, I forget which text it was. It's an apocryphal work. It's I think it may have been one of the Enochic works, actually, second or third Enoch. There was this time where they're describing, how God creates angels, and it's literally by speaking them into existence. Every time he speaks, a new angel is made. So like every word is created into like something physical, at least for Enoch, right? So it might have some loose connection with this, but of course that was written so much later. It would kind of be anachronistic for me to put into this context, but it is interesting.
Lilith is gonna like this. We had a children's book that was about when you pray. It's very important to pray with concentration, because when you say the words, every letter creates an angel, and if you
Oh my
don't say it
god.
with concentration, the angels are deformed.
Oh.
And so there's little like
Oh
little
my god.
there's like little like letters with wings, and like they've got like little like crutches, and they're like, see what happens when you don't pray
Oh
with
my
see.
god. That's a
Plot
horrible thing
to
to teach a child.
Platu, Verana, Nikto. Damn it! I created another mutant angel. Damn it.
And then these poor kids are going to be like, I said that wrong. I've caused a suffering being to come into existence and be miserable. Oh my god.
Well, I don't think they don't think they last forever. They're just like, you kind of think of them as like flames.
All
It's
I can
funny
think
how
of
reading the
now,
Old Testament.
all I can think of now, Isaac, is how Kent Hovind explains the fruit fly experiment, and looking at an angel without wings. What do we call it? A crawl?
Oh.
Man, leave it to Peter to always be thinking about
An angel without wings?
Yeah, when Hovind
Well, that's what-
speaks,
Yeah.
what is it? What is the character from South Park? A Mr. Hanky is born.
When an angel is born with a broken back, it's called an angle.
Oh.
You are not allowed to tell jokes like that until you've had children.
I'm going to text
Yes!
that. I'm going to text that to my creationist friend right now and see what he says.
Okay.
Okay. All
so-
right. Please continue. Verse 5.
Thank you. Know then in your heart that as a parent disciplines a child, so the Lord God disciplines you, not through reasoning, but by spanking. Therefore, keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and fearing him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with flowing streams, with springs and underground waters welling up in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley. And what you can make with those?
Bread.
Beer. man.
Beer.
And vines and fig
Uh.
trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. Let me tell you about the honeys. A land where you may eat bread without scarcity, where you will lack nothing. A land whose stones are iron, and from whose hills you may mine copper. You shall eat your fill and bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you at the expense of all the people he killed, that he made, that he didn't really like so much. Take care that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments, his ordinances, and his statutes, which I am commanding you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then do not exalt yourself, forgetting the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt into out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness, an arid wasteland, with poisonous snakes and scorpions. Poisonous snakes and scorpions? Can I live there? He
You
made
do.
water flow for you out of flint rock, not flint stone. That's a different place. Don't confuse it with bedrock. And fed you in the wilderness with manna that your ancestors did not know, to humble you and to test you. That's what I was doing. I was testing you. I wasn't lost. You're lost. I was just testing you. And in the end, to do you good. That's what I was doing. I was doing you good. Do not say to yourself, my power and the might of my own hand hath gained me this wealth, but remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, so that he may confirm his covenant, so that he swore to your ancestors, as he is doing today. If you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods to serve and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. Like the nations that the Lord is destroying before you, so shall you perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God.
Overacting.
10 out of
Let's
10.
not pretend
I
God
enjoyed
does
it.
not have anger management issues. Okay? We've all been here.
Yeah, just come on, Yahweh, just get a nose job and
Nose job.
yeah, because the anger is caused by his
Yeah.
nose.
Maybe
But
lay
whatever.
off the whiskey, try a bit more Valium.
Yeah, that's it. He just really, really hates his nose.
Yeah.
Oh. No, yeah. See, he has poor self-esteem. So that's why he has to slaughter cities. Because, he's special and he has a very sensitive ego. And we just really need to understand that and support him in his need to genocide babies so he can feel better.
You're enabling him. So Vesta Freya says the reason why it took 40 years to cross the desert was because they let Jesus take the wheel of the first ox cart and used GPS, God positioning sticks.
Yeah.
Oh, the magic sticks in the goater.
Okay.
Oh,
I'll start my
please.
I'll start my commentary. Verse 1. Nelson comments, a list of 4 verbs describes impending benefits that will follow from obedience. Verse 1 offers a distinctive theological outlook that makes entrance into the land dependent on obedience. This perspective is usually understood to be the contribution of an exilic writer. Here, the conditionality of obedience stands in tension with the promise of divine oath. The notion of oath returns in verse 18, where it is stated in terms of covenant. On verse 2, and test you in order to know. Tigay comments, Maimonides in Guide 324 found it problematic that God would test Israel in order to learn something. That would imply that he did not know how they would act. Hence, he took this verse to mean that the test was for others to learn the strength of Israel's obedience and to see how God provides for those who are devoted to him. However, this interpretation is forced. The concept of divine foreknowledge is not a systematic doctrine in the Bible, for the Bible sometimes describes God as testing and discovering, as seen in Genesis 2:19, 22:1 and 14, and Deuteronomy 13:4. Because humanity has free will, God does not know how people will act, and he therefore tests them.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say I would agree that it's a very forced, because you wouldn't really want to humble yourself, like, in the view of other nations. that just seems kind of silly to do to me.
Yeah.
It is interesting though that with the how they're supposed to be humbled, right? So they are getting food and sustenance from things that they shouldn't get sustenance from. I think this is also actually hinted at in Deuteronomy 32. I think like you also get like oil from the flint rock or whatever. So I think that whatever God was sustaining them with, it's of course not meant to be good. Maybe it would help us to picture it as the platonic form of food, I guess, like something like that. Like it's not supposed to be good, but it's not. But of course, I don't know. I don't know how that would fit with the the words of God interpretation. So I'm not sure. But
I'm a little confused too, because when Tomer was saying that God is testing and exploring, I'm thinking, okay, so God is a 13-year-old boy.
Burning the bugs with the magnifying glass. Yes, that's
well,
about
that will explain the temper tantrums he has.
it really would. It really would. Emotional regulation
he's
not
on
his
his edgy
sport.
phase. Yeah, he's on his.
I can't remember if it's. I can't remember if it's Rashi or Ibn Ezra when he talks about the testing of Abraham, and he explains it as, it's not that God doesn't know what Abraham's going to do; it's that He wants Abraham to be, what's the word? Have the merit of, to have the merit of what He's going to give him,
right?
By passing the test. So He knows what He's going to do, but you don't merit the reward unless you actually pass the test. So God tests him so that he can pass it, and therefore He can give him the rewards he deserves.
How does anybody read this and not see through it? That an omniscient being who knows everything that will ever happen. He knows when every sparrow falls. He knows every interaction through millions of interactions, what choices you're going to make. We don't have free will because He knows exactly what we're going to do before we know that there is even a choice to be made. He knows what choice we're going to make, right?
Yeah, and that's probably why I'm sure there's a correlation.
But He has to test us?
Yes. There's actually, among the more spiritually mature, by which I mean not P-Town, there is the idea. Oh, shush! You know I'm right. You even see that I remember the line one woman saying, "Prayer doesn't change God, prayer changes me," and that was very self-aware, albeit. Yeah. There is the idea that in prayer, you're bringing yourself more into line with God's will, not so much changing God's mind on what He's going to do, but helping yourself to sort of walk alongside and see it from His perspective. Now, the application here is obviously a little bit different, but if you're talking about a test, it might be to see what you would do. If any of us can talk about what we would do in an active shooter situation or some other dramatic or tragic thing, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The person who talks most about how brave they would be in that situation is usually the first to piss their pants and faint. What you're gonna do when the rubber hits the road is known by actually being in a difficult situation. Granted, we can't all be in all difficult situations and shouldn't, but in a sense, you could say and make the argument, if you were a little more of a grown-up, that God is testing people to show themselves their good and their bad, to bring about self-awareness and knowledge of your own faults that you're maybe unaware of, and then also the strengths you didn't know you had, and then you can move on from there. I don't need a God for that, but
I'm sorry, were you finished?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. This reminds me of when Sean Hannity was talking about there was a country music festival going on in Las Vegas, and there was a shooter who had like just infinite arsenal of ammunition, and he's shooting from an unlit window in one of 10 hotel towers that are surrounding this venue, and nobody can tell where the shots are coming from because it's not like he's made himself obvious. You can't see where the shots are coming from. But Sean Hannity said on Fox News that if he was there, with his little 10-shot 9mm,
Little pea shooter.
that he would have saved the day.
Yeah.
Because he somehow would have divined which tower, which floor, which window, and that he somehow would have landed the appropriate shot. When there was a whole bunch of other people there that had guns, they couldn't see where the fuck this was coming from. And this is what you're saying reminds me of this. You know, people who don't realize the power that they don't have, the ineptitude that they actually have. There was a demonstration of Black Lives Matter here in Dallas, where I live. And because it was a Black Lives Matter demonstration, you had to have a bunch of white guys show up with their assault rifles.
Right.
Because they needed to intimidate the people who scared them.
Yeah.
So you had all these guys show up with machine guns. And then we had an unknown shooter in one of the elevated windows, again, in the downtown area. Again, nobody knows where the building is. But as soon as somebody opens fire with what kind of gun, we don't know, doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of guys that are not carrying a 10-shot 9mm. They're carrying high-capacity assault rifles with extra, the extra long magazines, all of that. And all of these guys who were there for no other reason than to scare other people went running like chickens fleeing for cover.
Yep.
What happened to all their magic power? How come they weren't saving the day? There's like 30 of them. And they're running for cover now. It's just the way that people overestimate their ability that I find amusing.
Yeah. You know, when you read enough of this ancient literature, you gain a very strong sense of how differently these people thought of their gods than, people in the modern world do. In the ancient world, the gods were not your friends. When texts or when you're instructed to love them, and this is an instruction of it's more loyalty than anything, fealty, because you should be afraid of them, not just because they're powerful, but because they're really capricious and they're childish. Like, when you read the literature of the ancient Near East, the gods are childish, and it's out of this same milieu that so many of, that the certainly the Israelite, the Hebrew Bible texts come from, where Yahweh was just another one of these petulant capricious deities who could go off, on a dime, and for that reason, it was important to be loyal. It was important to be obedient. It was important to stay in check, because you just don't know what kind of a maniac this was. And
it reminds me,
it's wild. I was going to say, it's wild how that has transformed into, contemporary Christianity, where this is.
If you go into a church and you look at what it looks like inside, it'll be reflective of the government system at the time that denomination started up. Your early Protestants will all look like law courts. Your Catholic will look like the throne of a king. This God is very much the capricious, war-like chieftain who keeps peace by killing everyone who annoys him slightly and calling himself a god emperor.
Yeah, I want to back what Kip said about this. Not just that the gods are very childish. Listen to any sermon. This is not a college lecture. This is not meant for postgraduates. The sermons are delivered to children. People of that mindset, anyway.
Yeah, and they wanted to keep us like children because, only those who come to Christ as a little child will enter into the kingdom of heaven. And infantilization is another form of thought control. So, bite model.
Indeed. All right. So, Tomer, are you done?
No.
Say it. Say it.
Not yet.
Don't force him.
Oh,
That's only when I am interrupted mid commentary, which I'm expected that somebody will do just for this sentence. Yeah, thank you, Peter.
By the way, Peter, do we have those T-shirts yet?
Not yet. I haven't had time to look
I'm
up.
not even kidding.
We
I
will.
want those T-shirts.
We will. Hopefully, I can tell you more on Saturday.
Okay.
Okay, on verse 3, Lundbom comments, daily food is but one God-given gift for sustaining life. The words here, so often quoted, embody a great biblical truth, i.e., that everything proceeding from God is life-sustaining. The Deuteronomic preacher never tires of telling Israel that doing the commandments leads to life. Jesus quoted the present verse when answering Satan in the wilderness, as seen in Matthew 4:4 and Luke 4:4. Satan warned him to turn stones into loaves of bread. Satan wanted him to turn stones into loaves of bread, which was temptation enough for Jesus, who was fasting 40 days. The rabbis, for their part, established a relationship between bread and Torah on the basis of this verse. An Egyptian phrase has turned up in the Harris Papyrus, where the god Ptah is quoted as saying that, quote, one lives from what comes out of his mouth, end quote. And Clement of Alexandria in Christ the Educator 3:7-39-40 writes, one who possesses the Word, who is Almighty God, needs nothing and never lacks any of the things he desires, for the Word is an infinite possession and the source of all our wealth. However, someone may object and insist that he has often seen the just in need of food. This is rare and happens only where no one else is just. Besides, let him read the beautiful sentence, it is not by bread alone that the just man lives, but by the word of the Lord, who is the true bread, the bread of heaven. John 6:33-41.
really? We never see that, do we? Yeah. Best of all possible worlds, anyone?
I don't think he's done.
Yeah, I have verse 4.
Yeah, you gotta let Tomer finish or he gets cranky.
No, I'm just letting some seconds out just if somebody has commentary. So
I was hoping you would say the thing.
No, on verse 4.
Let's hear the funny stories about the clothing.
Yeah. Your clothes did not wear out. So Rashi explains how this is so. So the clouds of divine glory rubbed the grime off their clothes and pressed them like pressed garments. And their children too, as they grew, their clothes grew with them, similar to the shell of a snail which grows with it.
That's awesome.
That's a lovely image.
Somebody believes this.
God is my dry cleaner.
Also, on that, this is also almost cited in Nehemiah. In Nehemiah 9:21, 40 years you sustained them in the wilderness, so that they lack nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, and their feet did not swell.
I have them turn God into a lot of stupid shit, but a dry cleaner / fabric stretching tailor, fine.
There was a cartoon movie I watched with my kids recently. What the hell was that? The Puss in Boots thing, where somebody casts a spell to grow large, and he says, I was afraid I would be naked, but my clothes grew too.
Yeah, I have Ibn Ezra.
This is the level that people believe. I'm having trouble with that.
So Ibn Ezra writes that some say that the Israelites brought out many garments from Egypt. He, however, writes that it is most likely that the nature of the manna is not to produce sweat. And Ambrose, in On the Christian Faith 2:23, argued that the preservation of the Israelites' clothing in the desert is a figure of the resurrection.
Good to know that P-Town was prefigured by Ambrose.
About your feet did not swell. In the Hebrew, it's veraglecha lo batzeka. The word batzeka is derived from batzek, dough. Thus, their feet did not swell like dough, according to Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and Bechol Shor. Targum Suda Jonathan and Sadiq On read, your feet have not gone without covering, assimilating to 29:3. On verse 7, a good land, the Septuagint, Samaritan text, and several 4Q Deuteronomy scrolls read a good and broad land, assimilating Exodus 3:8. Lundbom writes that either and broad was lost by haplography or that the term is expansionist. Weinfeld notes that in the Jewish blessing after the meals, the mention of a good and broad land, in Hebrew Eretz Tova V'Rachava, is obligatory, according to Talmud Barachot 48b, which may indicate that the blessing contains a pre-Masoretic element. On verse 8, Tigay comments, these are the principal agricultural products of the land, known in halachic literature as the 7 species for which the land of Israel is praised. The appeal of these products is reflected in 2 Kings 18:32, where an Assyrian official tries to convince the Judites to surrender by promising that their place of exile will be a land like their own, described in virtually identical terms, end quote. And Ibn Ezra writes that Moses mentioned the foods which produce blood. He believed that these 7 types of food increase the blood supply.
Yeah. So these 7 fruits are it's a regular motif that comes up with, like, the 7 fruits, and it's considered like the traditional fruit of the fruit and grain of the land. And there is like some Jewish laws about, like, when you sit down to eat a meal or whatever, maybe not a meal, when you have something to eat, if you have like an apple and a pomegranate, you should eat the pomegranate first, because it's like more important or whatever. And I think there's also like different blessings or whatever. Like you might say, like, if you haven't had one of these fruits in a while, you might say a blessing that's like, blessed are God that I've come to this time or whatever. Yeah.
On verse 9, will not be scarce. The Hebrew, it's miskenut, which is a hapax. According to Lundbom, it is derived from the adjective misken, poor, as seen in Ecclesiastes 4:13 and 9:15, and Ibn Ezra and Rashbam, and appears to be a loanword from Akkadian mushkenutu, which means poverty. So that's an interesting bit.
In modern Hebrew, it means like, I don't know what the word is. How would you translate it into English?
Misken? Yeah, like a poor person, like not poor in the general poverty, like, oh, poor him, like, you know,
an unfortunate
unfortunate.
sap.
Yeah, something like this.
Yeah.
Unfortunate
Like,
soul.
what
I thought too.
How unfortunate,
you
when
poor
you would
thing.
say, like, Asa Miskan.
Yeah.
Miskan.
So now, a land where rocks are iron and you can dig copper out of the hills. So Weinfeld comments, the description is somewhat utopian, but has roots in reality. Iron mines were existent in Transjordan, as may be learned from Josephus, who tells us about an iron mountain in the region of Moab opposite Jericho in Wars 4:454, and compare Mishnah Sukkah 3:1, the Iron Mountain. Copper mines were found in the Arabah, and especially in the regions of Punon, found in Numbers 33 verses 42 to 43, and Timnah in Edom, end quote. The fragment Targum reads, a land whose stones are pure as iron and whose hills are firm as copper. And Targum Pseudo Jonathan reads, a land whose sages will enact decrees unalloyed as iron and whose disciples will propound questions weighty as copper.
Pseudo Jonathan.
Yeah, it's a very it adds a lot of midrashic literature.
Oh,
Jonathan.
yeah.
I think that's my favorite translation of all the year.
It's pretty fun. Yeah.
It is.
Aw.
It is.
I always get a kick out of some of these Torah texts, and you see it in Job too, where they mention iron before the Iron Age.
Mhm. On verse
Nothing to
10,
see here.
On verse 10, Chazal understood the word veberachta, and you bless, as giving thanks to the Lord after a meal. Thus, they've interpreted this verse as a commandment to recite the grace after meals, in Hebrew, birkat hamazon. Tigay writes that this interpretation is supported by verses 12 forward, which admonish Israel not to forget the Lord when it has eaten its fill. Lutzato understood veberachta to mean you will bless, i.e., the land is so bountiful that it will move the Israelites to thank the Lord when they have eaten their meals. And Chrysostom, in Homilies on Genesis 10:20, writes, do you see how it is especially appropriate after the enjoyment of food to set a spiritual meal for yourself, lest the soul, after satiety of bodily food, should lose its zest and fall into some disaster and make way for the wiles of the devil, who is always looking for an opportunity and anxious to deliver us a blow at a critical moment.
Yeah, I feel like Chrysostom should have added salt to his food.
Yeah. On verse 11, Nelson comments, the tests of prosperity replace the tests of wilderness deprivation, but the lesson that was clear in the wilderness will be less obvious in the rich land. The concentric structure in verses 2 to 6 highlights this verse as the central point of the chapter. Indeed, the danger of forgetting permeates the larger parenetic context found in 4:9 and 23, 6:12, 8:14, etc. This warning can be understood as introducing 4 modes of forgetting: to fail to observe the laws in verse 11, to be proud and ignore one's dependency on Yahweh in verse 14, to rely on one's own strength in verse 17, and to run after and serve other gods in verses 19 to 20. On verse 15, venomous snakes and scorpions. The Hebrew here is nachash, saraf, ve'akrav, which means seraph, snake, and scorpion, all in the singular, which echoes Numbers 21, verses 6 to 9, which tells of seraph snakes that attacked the Israelites in the wilderness. Rashi on Deuteronomy 1:19 writes that there were, quote, snakes thick as beams and scorpions large as bows, end quote, in the wilderness. And the
I saw that movie.
If seraphs are angels and angels have wings, are they saying that God sent winged snakes to kill them in the desert?
So
well, it's
this
not,
is well.
the seraph, although it does, there is a seraph angel. Like the seraph could be, like
It's just burning.
Talking about it in my comment. Yeah,
Yeah.
the saraf means to burn, so it maybe
But-
indicates like the poisonous burn.
But there's something that does need to be said here, where within the tradition of like the seraphs in the seraphim in the temple that Isaiah sees in Isaiah chapter 6, like these aren't angels in the sense that we picture these flying
little
flying
cherubs.
men.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a different type of, these are like mythical divine creatures, right? And typically the seraph is most commonly compared to like a burning snake, and one of the reasons for that is because of its association in texts like this with nachash, which is the word for snake here, which incidentally is also the same word that's used in Genesis 3 to describe.
Nahash only refers to cobras, doesn't it?
I think that's speculative, and I think there is some latitude to remain open here to the idea that these are semi-divine beings of some sort.
Now, by fiery serpent, I always took that was an interpretation, pertaining to the venom. That's what they meant.
And that's most commonly how it's understood. It's kind of interesting though in the Numbers story how this then gets turned into the cult of the Nehishto.
Oh,
the serpent on the staff,
or copper snake,
which is then mentioned again in I think it's
one of the
First Kings.
Yeah,
Second Kings chapter 18 in Hezekiah's reforms, one of the things that he does is he breaks the Nehishtan, the this serpent idol that's in the temple.
Yeah, I think were you here at that episode? I think I mentioned that. Is it possible that like the story in the Bible is retrofitting why this what would you call it thing?
How
why
it ended
was in the
up there.
temple?
Yeah.
Why was it in the temple? Yeah. Same with I guess.
I still
what
have.
else?
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, what else was there? Something in the temple? Like, oh, why was this in the temple? No, I can't remember what it might have been. Yeah.
So I have.
Yeah.
I still haven't finished my commentary. There we go. So yeah. So about the terrible the seraph snakes. Though the Peshitta renders it basilisks, serpents, and scorpions.
Nice.
Vulgate reads. The Vulgate reads the serpent burning with his breath, and the scorpion and the deep sas. And Philo
again, the serpent breathing with it. That's a spitting cobra.
I think we need to call Harry Potter.
And Philo, in Allegorical Interpretation 284, writes, "You see that it is not only when attracted by the passions of Egypt that the soul falls in with the serpents, but when it is in a wilderness too, it is bitten by pleasure, that subtle and snake-like passion. And pleasure's mode of action has received a most appropriate name, for it is here called a biting."
And right when you're reading that, I'm getting kisses. You talk about the passion of the serpent, and I'm getting kisses.
Yeah. On verse 18,
Jerome was. Oh, sorry.
No, not Jerome.
I was just gonna say Jerome was famously required a considerable amount of help translating the Hebrew text into Latin.
Yeah. On verse 18, and so confirms his covenant which he swore to your ancestors. Lundbom comments, confirmation of the oath made to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is given also in Deuteronomy as a reason for Israel's election as Yahweh's special people in 7:8, and for Israel being successful in its conquest of the land, 9:5. A significant space exists at this point in 5Q Deuteronomy, and Joseph Milik thinks Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob could have been present in the text. Weinfeld says that confirm or establish this covenant, in Hebrew hakim et berito, is an expression one might expect to find in the priestly writer, seen in Genesis 6:18, 9:9, and 11, Exodus 6:4, and Leviticus 26:9. In Deuteronomy, the expressions are confirm the word in 9:5, confirm the words of this law in 27:26, confirm you to himself as a holy people in 28:9, and confirm you today as a people in 29:12. And finally, on 19 to 20, Nelson comments, the theme of going after other gods and perishing falls outside the topic of chapter 8 and returns to the outlook of chapter 7. Perhaps these verses act as a sort of curse to balance the blessings highlighted in the previous verses. Verse 19 refers to the ideas and language of the Decalogue in 5 verses 7 and 9, serve and bow down. I witness against you and surely perish are paralleled in 4:26, 30 verses 18 to 19. To follow alien gods would cancel out the leading of Yahweh and walking in the way of Yahweh. Verse 20 points forward to the topic of 9 verses 1 to 6. The good news about Yahweh's obliteration of the nations contains within it the potential bad news of Israel's own destruction. And that's it from a commentary.
Okay. Anybody else have it? Oh, I've got some comments to read on this. Josh Varr offers $1.99. It says, appreciate the content. And then Matthew K offers 1 penny more and says, much love to the panel and the mod. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else have any comments on that? I'm guessing no.
I think, yeah, thanks to the mod.
It's 5.
So on Saturday, then, we will meet up again for Deuteronomy 9?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Kip, welcome back. Always happy to see you when you can find time to be here.
Mm.
Should we look for
Thanks.
you on Saturday as well?
Probably. What time do you guys go? Probably not. I've got
it's
I've
11
got
in the
another
morning.
stream. Oh yeah,
11 in the morning in Central Time. Where are you?
I'm hanging out with the competition. I'm doing a stream with a certain dinosaur friend of mine on Saturday. So
okay,
yeah.
Ah, yes, Ken Hovind.
No.
Hey, that is the Dr. Dino. This man
Oh,
has a
God.
I was gonna
doctorate.
say he didn't say that.
I will be on with
Dinology.
I will
Yes,
be on
he
with
scribbled,
the
"I'm his
Dapper
real
Dino.
doctor" on toilet paper he found in the desert. So he's now a PhD.
okay. All right. Well, any closing comments from anybody before we end the show?
Join the Discord. And
Yeah.
join the Discord.
go subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists. And they have the best
Good.
Bible study ever, and this is the second best Bible study ever. So go. So we on Fridays we still do the apocryphal podcast. So we do readings of apocryphal works. We're in second.
That stuff's so good.
It is.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy.
Do you
It's awesome.
have you ever caught it? Have you ever caught their show, Lilith, yet?
A couple of times, not nearly enough. I need to backlog, and of course, Lawrence was so kind as to invite us on their final episode, and I was, of course, so horribly sick I couldn't speak. So I came and was, messaging in the chat, trying to be like, "I love you. I'm sorry, I can't talk."
Yeah, we had a hell of a time on that final episode.
It was so funny, and that one crazy guy. Oh, by the way,
we had Wesley.
Oh, did you ever go to the dentist and verify whether or not your teeth were magically healed by Jesus' knock that none of us felt?
No, they're not magically healed. No.
All right. Well, we gave it the old college try.
Mr. Crennan says, "Thank you, Aaron, Lilith, Lawrence, Dr. Kip, Isaac, and and then the message moved. Isaac and Tomer, your content, insight, intelligence, and sense of humor is much appreciated. Thank you sincerely for that."
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.